Allie and myself, we're the hosts here, both head honcho over at the gym community and then Project Rain. We're going to be covering a lot of topics in this, although we're going to try to keep the topics and the way that we cover them as simple as possible so that we can, ideally make sure that everybody can understand what we're talking about. Um, let's see. So, topics we're talking about here, we're going to be talking about calories, macros, so protein, carbohydrates, fat. We're going to talk about TDEE and tracking calories as well as macros. TDEE is total daily energy expenditure, what that stands for. Uh, we'll talk about deficits and surpluses. I know we've talked about that, maybe a couple times here in the past, but we're going to go into that a little bit here again. Um, we had meal planning and prepping on some of the slides as well as micronutrients, but I don't think we're going to really cover that this time around. Um, I think we kind of agreed that those could be topics in of themselves. So we're not really going to discuss those. If anybody has any questions on them, we can kind of go into them a little bit. But other than that, we're going to end everything with a Q&A. So understanding calories. So what is a calorie? Calorie is it's energy. That's what it is. And all your food is that's what your food is made up of. It's made up of calories, um, protein, carbohydrates, fat, all of that. Different foods have different calorie content. So that would be based on your macronutrient makeup. So that's how you get your different, calories amount for those. Um, let's see. And that's energy balance and weight management here. You can think of calories in and out from a point of view when it comes to like finance budget. So that's a lot of people use that in reference to it. What they mean by that is something like, for example, when you look at something like a deficit, you're less calories, right? You're eating less calories than what would take to maintain your weight. So if you're eating around 2,000 calories, for example, uh, a deficit would be something like maybe 500 calories less. So you'd be eating maybe 1,500 calories per se, and that's what they kind of mean when it comes to the finance budget or so. Um,
Yeah, I thought this was a really good example
yeah.
because it's really easy to visualize the green for surplus, red for negative, and it's again energy balance is a perfect way of describing that.
hmm Yeah. Exactly. Let's see here, and we'll go.
So the big three for macronutrients, we got carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Now, as everyone knows, I tend to talk a little too much about certain things, so I could talk about these three for quite a bit, but we're going to try and stick to the screen. So reference the graphic on the right anytime you want. It's going to be the same information, just formatted differently. So we'll start with carbohydrates. For every gram of carb, you're gonna have, it has 4 calories of energy. This is what your body uses mostly for activity, normal day-to-day movement. Anytime you do anything, you're using some sort of carbohydrate, or at least it was at one point. And this is your quick access of energy. So if we think of, we'll get into different foods later, but carbohydrates are your main component of fuel. I'm going to wrap this up with thermic effect altogether, so I'll go right to protein next. Each each gram of protein has the same amount of calories as a carb, 4 and 4. So they're 1 to 1 calorie wise, but their uses are different. Carbohydrates, again, source of energy, where proteins are your source of repair. So these are the building blocks. You go to the gym, you create micro tears in your muscles. These proteins are going to come in and repair them a little bigger than last time. So they're also really effective when it comes, or they have a high thermic effect yield. and fats a little bit bigger, about 2.25 times bigger calorie wise. So that's why when we talk about ultra processed foods, high fat foods, the reason they're so calorie dense and so nutritiously deprived is because of fats mainly. And fats are extremely important for one, prolonged activity, especially in a deficit, and things like hormone production and joint lubrication. So just remember that cutting out a food group is almost never the solution. You need these three because they are the big three macronutrients. They all have a role, they all have a part in your body working in unison. And now to talk about the thermic effect of food, essentially, your body burns energy digesting this food and processing this food. So each have a higher yield than the other. So fats, pretty low, almost nothing. Whereas carbohydrates, a little higher, about 5 to 10% of those calories you eat are going to be burned just in digestion. And then protein has the highest yield. So let's say you eat 100 calories worth of protein, or in this case 25 grams, about 20 to 30% of those calories, you're going to burn an equivalent amount to what you consume. So if we consume 100 calories, we're burning 20 calories digesting that 25 grams of protein. I hope that made sense. If it didn't, let me know in chat and I'll re-explain that. Anything you want to add, Kyle?
Nope, sounds about it. And then
Okay.
I know the next slides here are going to be going into carbohydrates, proteins a little bit more in detail um, as well. So we'll go to the next one here. So carbohydrates, these are some examples. So we'll when when the event is over, we will be uploading this and the all these the fruits, vegetables you see here on screen as well for proteins, fats. You'll see those eventually as well. But these are videos that kind of link out to tiered lists for these specific foods. I thought that they were, quite interesting, honestly,
I
and
think they're a
and
good
would give you
touchstone.
a good yeah, they definitely give you a good idea or a good reference when it comes to these kinds of foods. So, but carbohydrates, like Brawley said, they are the body's preferred source of energy overall. Um, and typically you have the two different kinds. So your simple carbohydrates and your complex carbohydrates. Simple meaning something like white bread, white rice. Typically, like the more processed foods you're going to find, or processed carbohydrates. Sugary drinks, and refined grains, like I said, with the white bread and white rice. Uh, and then for complex carbohydrates, you'll see something like brown rice, quinoa, fruits, vegetables, and legumes. So those are pretty typical. And
And
so
similarly, proteins,
mhm.
we have basically all your meats. That includes poultry, fish, seafood, and then vegetarian options or vegetarian friendly, eggs, dairy, seeds. And one thing to also touch on is that some carbs do have protein as well. Um, Especially when we see a lot of vegetarians now, and we can talk about this after the lecture. But there are plain carbohydrate pairings that create whole proteins. So something like brown rice and black beans paired together have a complete amino profile very similarly to meat. So there are options out there.
Which is incredibly interesting, honestly. Next, fats. So fats, in that way, of course, there is going to be your healthy fats and your unhealthy fats. Uh, so fats themselves are the most calorie dense macronutrients. So again, if you reference back to that previous slide, that one showed that each gram of fat equates to 9 calories per gram, right? And that's why you see higher fatty foods. They're so calorically dense. You're seeing a lot more calories in those because of the fat makeup in those foods. But your fats, you'll see something like the saturated fats, your unsaturated fats, trans fats, um, as well. Um, and again, they're the healthy avocados, nuts, seeds, olive oil. Unhealthy, pretty self-explanatory, right? Fried foods, not so great. Processed food or processed meats, processed foods in general with the fat. Uh, Butter, um, typically not so great. Um, and macronutrient ratios. Do you want to take this one, Brawley? Or
Sure. So we're going to be talking about the ratios. So whenever we start a diet or a weight loss journey or a weight gain journey, we use our calculators and we get a bunch of numbers. We get how many fats, how many proteins, and how many carbs. And we're going to be talking about how we can customize those based on your goal, how we can customize those based off weight loss, weight gain, and maintenance. So they're going to have different ratios between protein, carb, and fat. And then we're also going to talk about adjusting over time and changing these ratios based off of the response of your body. Because at the end of the day, we are all individuals and we all have different things internally and genetics that will factor into weight loss, weight gain, and maintenance.
a deal. So these are some examples of macronutrient ratios. Although it can be a little, I would say, subjective. But these are some general ideas. So something like weight loss, for example, you might see, somewhere between 25-35% of protein of your calorie makeup would be as protein. So if you think, let's just say 1,000 calories, right? Uh, 250 to 350 of those calories are going to be, um, that protein makeup. Although nobody probably really should be eating about 1,000 calories unless you're a child. But carbohydrates, you might see 30-45% of calories, and then fat 20-30% of calories or so. Um, Muscle gain, same idea. 30-40% of calories. Carbohydrates would be 40-50% of calories, and then fats 20-30%. Um, and then again, maintenance 30% or so calories, 40 to 50% of calories for carbohydrates, and 20-30% uh, of calories from fats. Um, a lot of this, I don't typically, when it comes to how I kind of do what I do, I don't typically break it off of percentages like that myself. I kind of follow I have the note here, and I think Brawley has some things to say about this as well. But I have this note here at the bottom that says, talk about prioritizing protein intake and then backfilling with fat and carbohydrates. So this is typically what I would do instead of basing my diet purely off of percentages. I would just aim for, let's say, about um, a gram of protein per body weight, so pound. So for me right now, I'm about 170 pounds. Um, I would just consume about 170 grams or so of protein, and then I would backfill my diet with either carbohydrates and fat. I would prioritize fat to a certain extent, and then I'd backfill whatever I need from there with carbohydrates, and that's typically how I would do it. Um, Probably, I know you probably have some things to say
Yeah.
about this.
So one thing I just want to point out, if we look at all the numbers on the screen, there are a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty consistent throughout, with the biggest change being in carbohydrates. So if we take the middle of the first protein number, which is 30, we can see 30, 30, and 30. For fats, it's 20 to 30 consistently. And then carbohydrates have the biggest fluctuation between 30 and 50 versus, weight loss versus weight gain. So if you find this dieting stuff to be, kind of a drag and you want to make it as easy as possible, you can have the same diet for weight loss and weight gain, just increase your carbohydrates moderately. That's like the cheat sheet version. Um, at least when looking at this screen, right? We I agree with what Kyle said as well. Prioritizing protein, absolutely, especially on weight loss. But when it comes to weight gain, generally speaking, you're eating a higher volume of food, higher quantity of food. So you're going to be getting protein from a lot of sources, not just the protein category. Because as I mentioned before, carbohydrates do contain protein. Something like a bagel, right? We have 280 calories for an everything bagel. That's going to have somewhere between 9 and 13 grams of protein. So you will be getting it elsewhere. So prioritizing it on weight loss, since the carbohydrates are lower, is the best idea. So you can bump that ratio a little bit up as the carbs come down. But again, to each their own. We'll get into adjusting per individual in a little bit.
Yeah, I was trying to find some information on. I know Arnold Schwarzenegger. He has a split, or I mean, it's pretty typical. But I think I remember reading an article in particular about him, and he had a specific split that he always runs. I can't remember the exact numbers uh,
For
that
diet,
that he, yeah, for like calorie makeup. I can't remember exactly what it was though.
yeah, the
Um,
the
I think it
golden
was like a
era
40
was generally
40
higher
20
fat.
or something. Higher fat. Okay.
Yeah, they liked they always swore by like steak and eggs, right? I mean, great sources of creatine,
Hmm.
but the
Yeah.
there's a big push for the the high fat, low carb during the golden era. But
Hmm. Gotcha. So TDEE, so total daily energy expenditure. This is the let's kind of go through it. So here, so what we're going to cover in TDE, this is what this is. So what is TDE? We'll cover that. Factors influencing your total daily energy expenditure. Uh, and then we've got some other things here: meal planning, prepping, TDE, and nutritional goals. So, what is TDE? Like I've said, it is the total daily energy expenditure. It represents the total number of calories your body burns in a day to maintain its basic functions and fuel your activities. So, this is the accumulation of exercise, of walking, of everything that you do that expends calories, just existing, all of it. It's the accumulation of that, and that is what your TDE is. It's your maintenance calories, is what it is. So the minimal or um, the minimal calories you need to just exist and go through your normal routine every single day, right? That's what that is. Um, so again, these are in reference. These are your maintenance calories. If you have ever heard of this saying, it's essentially your body's calorie budget. So that's where again that kind of finance budget idea comes into play. That is so. And this reference is kind of like what I was saying there, your factors that influence TDEE. So you might see like your BMR. So BMR itself doesn't, uh, it's the energy your body uses at rest for essential functions. So breathing, organ function, maintaining the body temperature. So really basic bodily functions is what that is. That doesn't include what calories you're expending when it comes to exercise or anything else. And that's what our next two here are. So non-exercise activity thermogenesis, NEAT. You may have heard of that. Um, so NEAT, the energy your body burns for daily activities like walking, fidgeting, and maintaining posture. This accounts for 15 to 30% of your TDEE. So this is a really interesting one, to be honest, and something that I like to try to really be conscious about. It's actually quite difficult, but it's so especially like fidgeting, for example. Uh, all of this is just movements, unintentional movements, almost that helps burn calories, and it can be quite substantial throughout the day. Um, and then physical activity, PAT. So this is just exercise. So planned exercise, resistance training, cardio, anything that you actually have planned to exercise. So again, the energy your body burns during exercise and physical activities. This varies greatly based on your activity level and can significantly impact your TDEE. Um, but all of these factors are again what accumulates into your total daily energy expenditure.
So
So,
for this one, we're just going to go back to the weight loss, weight gain, maintenance. So I will preach this to a lot of people, especially teenagers, that your energy expenditure is more important than necessarily the calorie deficit. So you can eat the same thing and create the calorie deficit through activity. So for weight loss in a nutshell, to achieve calorie deficit and lose weight, which they go hand in hand, we need to consume fewer calories than our TDE. And ways to increase our TDE, like Kyle just mentioned, is mostly through activity. So either unintentional or intentional activity. And as for weight gain, it's the exact opposite of weight loss. Shocker. That we need a surplus to gain weight. So we either need to reduce some of our intentional activity a little bit, which I probably don't recommend, or we need to increase how many calories we're consuming. And our maintenance is that was that Goldilocks, just right in the middle, in
mhm.
between weight gain and weight loss. So this is your number where as much as you're consuming, your weight's not fluctuating very much, your training's good, your recovery's good, and that'll be the number that you base the weight loss and weight gain off of.
Right on. Simple enough. And we're going to get into TDEE here shortly as well, and how to calculate that. That might be for slides coming up, but I think it'll give us give everybody a better frame of reference on when it comes to like weight loss, weight gain, maintenance, like having numbers
Mm-hmm.
set in front of you to see. It's going to be a lot simpler to kind of picture that. So if you don't really kind of get that concept or any of these concepts right now, I think that's going to be something that kind of clarifies that.
And also, just going off what you just said, the difference between a quote unquote high metabolism individual and someone that is just active. I think that I have a high metabolism gets thrown around a lot, and our examples will probably shine light on how big of a difference activity can make.
Right, and somebody like that too that has a high metabolism, they may, they might just fidget a lot too. I mean, maybe
Yeah,
they're relatively active, but they might fidget a lot. They might do so that goes down, down to that like passive, unintentional movement, right?
yeah,
Is they may very well just fidget a lot more than somebody else. Some people are just more apt to do that.
yeah. Or
So
someone like Gerald who walks 30,000 steps during his job.
yeah,
That is
yeah.
passive. It's not intentional, but that is going to contribute a lot to how many calories you can have.
That that's a debate, isn't it? When it comes to steps, because steps can be intentional or unintentional way.
Sure. Yeah, it all comes down to if it's constant or sprinkled. So if
Right,
it's like an intentional 2 hour block of elevated heart rate, that's different than,
right,
walking up the stairs, getting a piece of paper, coming down the stairs.
yeah, yeah, it definitely makes sense. Um, so tracking your TDEE. So this is kind of where we get into how you can how you can calculate that. A lot of I'm sure many people here are used to using TDE calculator. .NET specifically, because I know we throw that one around quite often. So online calculators is one of those ways that you can do that. These use your age, weight, height, sex, and activity levels to give a rough estimate. So that's important. It's a rough estimate of where your maintenance calories are, cutting calories, bulk calories, whatever it might be. Um, so again, TDEcalculator.net is a great one. That's a typical one, but they all use the same equation. I think it's St. Yours. I can't remember exactly how to say the name, but there's a couple different equations that these calculators actually use, and I think that is that first one that I was kind of referencing. Do you know the name, Bradley? Do you remember the name of that equation?
There are actually, I think there's like 6 or 7, and they
Yeah,
all sound very European.
yeah,
Like,
they're hard.
yeah,
They're
many
hard to say.
letters. Yeah,
I can reference some material later. I could
I
share
believe
it or something.
it's in one of the slides.
Yeah, let's see. I bet you. So, and then fitness trackers. Some trackers monitor your activity and estimate your calorie expenditure throughout the day. I think these can be, I think these can be quite off though, is the thing. And I mean, I really any calculator, anything that it's not going to be exact regardless. Um, if you're using a fitness tracker to, measure your expended calories, uh, anything like that, really, but in particular, expended calories, as long as the tools are consistent, right? If you're using the same tool every single time, that matters, because you're going to get that consistent measurement every single time you reference it, as long as again you're using the same tools to do so. Um, so your Apple Watch, whatever it is, as long as you consistently reference that, that's fine. Consulting a registered dietitian or expert. Yeah, of course. I mean, if you can go to any experts like this, but to measure TDEE as well as get other body composition metrics, something like knowing what your body fat percent is, fat percent or body fat percent, muscle mass percent, your overall body composition is nice, definitely good to know, um, and that's something where they might be able to help you more so with that. But otherwise, online calculators are probably going to be some of the best that you can really reference. Uh, and most convenient, I would say. So calculating TDE. So BMR is going to be your starting point. So that's again, if we go back to that, that's your basal metabolic rate there. So that is what your calories are just to exist. It's not your TDEE, which is your overall calories accounting for, like we referenced, the passive walking, the fidgeting, as well as exercise and whatnot. But again, your BMR is just your basal metabolic rate, which is what calories are required to just solely exist for your normal bodily functions. Activity levels and TDE, so that is important when it comes to determining your overall TDE, of course, and then adjusting TDE over time, and then importance of tracking weight.
All right, so BMR,
Eh,
the starting point. So as Kyle mentioned many times, it stands for basal metabolic rate, but going forward, we're just going to reference this as BMR. And it is the building block. It's the biggest thing. This is the same thing that he was talking about earlier. If you just a great example I like to reference, if you just lay in a bed for 24 hours, your body's still going to burn calories because it needs to maintain its function. So that's essentially what the BMR is. And now the Harrison Benedict equation, which is it was either that one or the other one that he's referencing. There are two.
I think
Is it?
Mifflin one was the one,
Oh, was it? Okay.
but yeah, both of those are the most prominent ones that I see. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're gonna be correct for majority of individuals. At the end of the day, they're all estimates, and you as an individual are gonna need to make adjustments so it fits your lifestyle. The Harris Benedict is used mostly for people, like the average individual. So people with high muscle mass or extreme body compositions, you know, IFBB pros, people that have been training a long time, professional athletes even, they are going to be outliers compared to the average individual. So you could choose something like the Mifflin St. Yor equation, which is for wired population. So, you know, the groups of people that I just talked about, athletes, professional
Mm,
bodybuilders, probably powerlifters as well, strongmen.
yeah. All right. And then let's go to the next one here. So I think we have, let's
Perfect.
see. Yeah. So this just references your exercise. So this is what you'll often see in like calculators as well, because again, they use this to refer these calculators or what have you. They use it to reference uh, what or estimate at least um, what your calories would be or for your TDEE there based on your level of exercise, right? Uh, So that's kind of what we're getting at here is BMR alone doesn't tell the whole story. Um, your daily activities significantly impact your TDEE, so exercise, and again even that passive movement. Each activity level has a corresponding activity factor, which is multiplied by your BMR to estimate your TDEE. And we'll see that when we kind of calculate these out because we do have some examples coming up as well.
Yeah, and if we go back real quick just for one
Sure.
second, I just want to give
Yeah.
some references because I see office job, which this I would say office job, great example. You're sitting on your
Mm,
butt majority of the day. Moderate, I would say something closer to retail. So you're doing a lot of unintentional walking, but it's not necessarily hard exercise. And then extremely active, that would be something like construction. So if you're doing construction and you're weightlifting X amount of days a week, your TDEE is going to be way higher than someone like myself that is just, sitting in an office. Just wanted to give some
right,
light.
right. No, that's a good one. Or working in a warehouse, right? Getting thirty
True.
thousand steps
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
day.
That
So
might even get
yeah,
closer to very active.
right. So change it. So adjusting TDEE over time. So this is important because your TDEE it does adjust. It does move um, based on so changes in body composition. Gaining muscle mass increases your total daily energy expenditure, while losing fat decreases it. Um, Likewise, the reverse is also true. Losing muscle mass decreases TDEE, while gaining fat increases TDEE. So that's just referencing that obviously with whatever mass you have, fat, muscle mass, it's going to increase or decrease that calorie expenditure, um, is all. So, and then changes in activity level, of course, increasing or decreasing your activity level will impact your total daily energy expenditure. So if you are working out 3 days a week and then you bump it up to 5 days a week, that maybe you'll burn an extra 300, 500 calories per day from that exercise, hour of exercise, hour and a half of exercise, right? So you're increasing your overall calorie expenditure throughout the week. Uh, or likewise, if you did the opposite, you work out 5 days a week, and all of a sudden maybe you were losing weight on 5 days a week, and all of a sudden you dropped it down to maybe 2 days a week, and you're not losing weight anymore. That could very well be why. Um, Individual variations, metabolism can differ slightly between individuals due to genetics and other factors as well. Um, let's see.
So we'll talk about weight tracking real quick. Validation of your TDE. So this is basically we're going to get an estimate using the calculator, and now we need to validate if that estimation is close, accurate, and if not, how are we going to change it? So when you start either a weight loss or a weight gain, there will be a few week period where you have to adjust. You might get lucky right off the bat. Perfect. Keep going. But for majority of individuals, there will be an adjustment period. So how do we adjust? And corruption left a question in chat that I'm going to touch on because it's a part of this as well. So monitoring progress. Seeing consistent weight loss, about a pound a week, confirms your approach is effective for weight gain or for weight loss. I'm sorry, and for the opposite of weight gain, right? So if you're in a surplus, you're gaining about a pound or less a week, you're on track. Now, if you're on weight loss and you're gaining weight, okay, well, maybe we need to cut those calories back a little bit, or alternatively, we need to increase that intentional activity. Now, let's say your schedule is extremely packed and you work in an office, very hard to get some intentional activity. Really try to, sprinkle some walks in there, increase that NEAT then. As we would much rather increase activity than reduce calories, but both are okay to an extent. And now corruption talked about those scales that measure body fat percentage. So I just want to touch on those. Those are fine, especially the ones you have at home. They might not necessarily be accurate, but they will be good for measuring trends. So don't look at the number per se, but you can look at the direction that the metrics are going. So if the body fat is increasing, you know that your body fat is increasing. If your body fat is decreasing, you know that your body fat is decreasing. So the trends are generally accurate, but the numbers are not. So it might say you're 14%, you're actually 18%. Doesn't matter too much. Just look at the overall picture. And the biggest thing,
That's
oh, go ahead.
sorry. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I'll touch on what I was
Okay.
gonna say here, but go ahead.
I just wanted to finish this slide out with regularly tracking can be motivating for some and demotivating for others. Just remember it's all in the numbers. So if it's been a couple weeks and you don't see a lot of change, just keep playing with it and it'll eventually work out. If you have any questions, ask me or Kyle. Ask someone else in your gym. I'm sure there's plenty of people there that do the same thing you're trying to do. Talk to other individuals that have done it and see, kind of pinpoint and troubleshoot where you're going wrong.
Yeah, yeah. So I was just going to. I mean, Brawley makes a really good point in that is that you're actually trends is what you want to focus on, and having a number to reference is good because the number itself shows the trend. If that makes sense, it doesn't matter so much as to like for example when I was talking about using a modality like an Apple Watch or uh, any type of watch, right, or electronic device to measure your
Mm-hmm.
calorie expenditure. That's what we're kind of looking at, right? Is we're looking at maybe it says you're only burning 100 calories, right? But you're actually burning 400. That doesn't. I mean, it's a big. I doubt it's going to be that much off, but just the frame of reference here is that you're you're it's about that consistent measurement. So let's
Yep.
say one day it's 100 calories, the next day it's 104 calories, the next day it's 105 calories, the next day it's 100 calories. It's about that consistency in that measurement, right?
Yep.
Um, and then it's about the trend. If you want to increase that calorie expenditure or decrease it for some reason, because some people do, some people do want to decrease their calorie expenditure so that they maybe it makes it easier to gain weight, whatever it is. Um, but you would just track that trend over time. Increase your calories, start walking an extra few 3,000 steps a day, and you'll watch that number jump. Maybe it jumps to 130, right?
Yep.
Calories expended, or so on, right?
Yep.
It's not so much about the specific number; it's about the trends, and it's about the consistency of it all. And same idea with weight. If we did weight itself, maybe you get on the scale and your scale is not measuring correctly. Maybe it's off by 40 pounds, right? uh, again, it's about that consistency. You get on that scale in the morning every single day to measure your weight, and you notice your weight is going down on the scale. Maybe again it's inaccurate by 40 pounds or whatever it might be, but if that weight is going down on that scale every week consistently, you know you're losing weight.
Yep.
And of course something to reference would be how you look. Look at yourself in the mirror, whatever it might be, because you'll notice those changes as well, and that just kind of proves that you're going the right way. And same thing vice versa, or if you're maintaining whatever your goals is, that's really what it's solely based on. But again, you're looking at those trends and the consistency of those measurements. That's all.
Yep.
So
Biggest takeaways for sure. And
yep, yeah,
the last
exactly.
one being relative effort. I am a I will die on the hill that relative effort is going to be your biggest contributor over anything else. If things aren't working or going the way they are, maybe you need to put a little more into it. So, as Kyle mentioned, adding a little walk here and there. Let's I know some of us have kids, some of us don't. Might be easier for some other than others. I know that me myself, I don't have kids or anything. Sometimes I need to go on a walk at like 10:15. But at the end of the day,
Mm,
if you want something bad enough, you will do what needs to be done.
yeah, yeah, and sometimes it comes down to knowledge too. I mean, of course, maybe people that you might just not know what to do, and that's
Mhm.
I mean, that's kind of
Absolutely.
again the
Absolutely.
importance of being a part of something like this, or going through or listening in on these conversations too, is getting an idea of what you can do, right? Maybe not what you
Yep.
need to do, but what you can do to move the needle forward when it comes to whatever goals you have in mind. So let's see. Next one. What do we got
Oh, here
here?
it is.
Yeah,
I love
calculating
the
TDE.
animation.
So this is yeah. So this is going to be a couple examples that we're actually going to have. So this is what I referenced earlier, maybe a few slides back. This will give you a good idea of how to calculate your TDE using. We're going to use TDEcalculator.net to do so, um, and it'll just give you a good frame of reference of what we're talking about when it comes to this TDEE. So, are you able to share that, Brawley?
Yeah, I will. I'm gonna go to the next
Okay.
slide. I'm gonna snip them and put them in chat so I can reference them.
Okay, perfect. And I might be able to pull it up too. I might be able to send it here. I could work on doing that if you want to.
Yeah, I just need the one to get started.
Yeah, I'll send the slide image in chat.
Okay. So here, oh god, it's coming up pretty poorly. Can you guys see that better? Super zoomed in for me, but I hope that's better. So
Yeah.
we have imperial for our eagle, bald eagle folks, and then we have metric for the rest of the world. I will be doing imperial. So our first example, we have John, the office worker. Hidden a little too hard to home, but he is 30 years old. He weighs 180 pounds. He is 5 foot 10 inches, and he works an office job. This one, I would more often than not just leave blank, especially if you are, a couple years into fitness, because as we mentioned before, depending on which scale we're using or which formula, we could vary the results. So I would it says optional, leave it optional. So what do we get with this? Okay, we have a BMR of 1783 and a sedentary calorie expenditure, or our TDEE, at 2139. Now, I want to draw a fine line here. So, when it comes to weight loss and calorie deficits, just using a little bit of math, we see that these are not greater than a 500 calorie difference. So, a lot of people see this number and take this number and they'll say, okay, I want to lose a pound a week. I'm going to subtract 500. Now, the issue being with that is now we're dipping below our BMR, and that can be dangerous for a couple different reasons. So I just want to make sure that at least the several people watching know that when you're calculating for a deficit, it is never okay to dip below here unless you are, you know, X amount of weeks out from a bodybuilding competition. When you need to go sub 10, 8%, that's the only situation. But outside of that, I don't think most of us are doing that, and we're not competing at a high level. So we're just going to say it's never okay to dip below this amount. Now, talking about John the office worker, it gives us an ideal weight. A couple different formulas give us a nice little range. This is also going to depend on your personal goals. But we know that John is overweight, at least according to the BMI. John could be kind of jacked. We don't know. But it says, based on the activity level, he works a desk job and he works out 2 to 3 times a week for light exercise. So we can assume he just likes to get his heart rate up. But let's say that he wants to make some changes. Well, we can look at the different variations. We have maintenance. So let's say he wanted to run a maintenance phase for a little bit, or a recomp. He could start with this one, and again, they're going to change in ratios. So we have our protein, carbohydrate, or protein, fat, carbohydrates. 160 grams of protein, 214, and 160 again. They are all within good range, 30 to 40%. Our fats, we have 35, 40, and 20. Now, from a experience perspective and an education perspective, I think that these estimates are a little high when it comes to weight loss. When it comes to bulking or maintenance, that can absolutely be a healthy range. But when you get closer to 40, in my opinion, that's a little too much unless you have other health implications. But so either of these could work out. Let's say John picks this one. John's going to go with the moderate carb. He's going to go on a maintenance phase, or better yet, let's say John wants to lose a little bit of weight. Now these protein numbers are a little low, so based off, and they're suggesting we eat below our BMR. So that's why it's important to take what we said earlier and apply it to the numbers that are given. So we want to make sure we don't just take these numbers at face value, but we adjust them based on our personal goals. So since we are looking to increase muscle mass or either maintain muscle mass, we would want a little higher protein. So we might go closer to our body weight. Now, if we go closer to our body weight, we either have to take away from carbs or fats. So we can, in some cases, kind of pick and choose. If we wanted closer to 20 fat, 40 protein, we could take these two and then backfill with carbohydrates. So whatever was left over calorie wise. Again, it's going to depend on your goals particularly, but now let's compare these metrics and this score with our other individual. What's her name? Sarah, the fitness enthusiast.
Sarah. Yep.
She is a female, age 25, 140 pounds. She's 5'6", and she is very active. So we are going to say 5 to 6. We could do both, but let's do this one. So right off the bat, we see that Sarah is burning quite a few more calories per day, almost 300. Not only is it's going to be heavily influenced by her exercise because female versus male by itself, females generally burn less calories. Additionally, she's at 40 pounds less body weight. So those two huge factors when it comes to calorie expenditure, and she's still ahead, just showing you that the 5 to 6 days of exercise is pretty heavily impacting the calorie expenditure. And now, just to draw a little more comparison, let's make it the same age and the same weight. So we're going to put John in two different, let's say John is 3 months into his fitness journey now. Oh, he's still a female. This is how much of a difference intentional heavy activity can do. So if we look at the top, being sedentary versus intentionally exercising can, it's almost a 50% jump. Is there anything you wanted to touch on in this, Kyle?
No. So I mean that actually was a point that I was going to make too. Is and that's the one thing when your calories are very low like that. Uh, I know that's what you're talking about there when it came to cutting. That his cutting calories put him below BMR,
Yeah.
and so with that, you know, in his case, it would be more far more ideal to just increase his calorie expenditure rather than decrease the amount of calories he's consuming. So decrease the amount of food he's consuming. Um, so he would be far better off. He was only working out, I think it was 2 to 3 days a week of light exercise at first. And in that scenario, maybe it's better he either starts increasing intensity during those 2 to 3
Mm-hmm.
sessions that he's already doing, or adds a day, maybe a couple days per week, um, or just maybe more intentional walking. I mean, the variables are unlimited, really. There's a lot of different options you could do, but generally the idea is that he is better off increasing the amount of calories he's expending rather than decreasing the amount of calories he's consuming. So again, decreasing the amount of food he's eating per day. Um, yeah. So that's
Excellent. And I just wanted to touch on one more example, especially because BY asked about school. So again, I would say the average student is lighter than the 30-year-old office worker. So I kept the same height. I made them 18. So let's say they're a senior in high school. This is actually exactly my metrics in high school. Um, so when I graduated as 18, I was an inch taller before I got scoliosis, and I was about
Hmm.
130 pounds. So we have our 1939. That is with very little activity. Now, when you start going to the gym a little more and, adding cardio, that number can jump up by about 600. So it's I don't want to say it's fairly easy to get to the next stage, but if you make little marginal improvements like we've been talking about, you know, becoming a little more active here, a little more active there, you can always get to the next stage.
Yeah, yeah, and that's from my perspective. That's like exactly where I'm at right now too. Is that I'm at the point where I don't want to lower my calories much more. Um, I probably could a little bit, but I don't really want to. Instead, I want to more reasonably focus on calorie expenditure.
Yep.
Um,
And
it's just
also you're more full. Sometimes it's hard to even eat enough, especially if you're eating, leaner,
mhm,
less processed foods. So
right.
increasing activity is almost always better for diet sustainability as well. Because if you're
Hmm.
constantly starving yourself, you might, you know, you might binge here and there, and then your progress is going to slow, and you're going to wonder why is the scale not moving. It just kind of snowballs into, uh, wrecking your diet.
Right, and you just don't see progress for X period of time, and
Yep.
you lose faith, and then you fall off the bandwagon, and you just
Hmm.
stop going to the gym and stop eating healthy, and it's just yeah, snowball effect, like you said.
It's all
So,
about
um,
sustainability.
yeah, sustainability, right? Small changes. Think small changes progressively.
All right, again, I need to learn to chill with my examples, but anyone have questions off of that? Yeah, I'm gonna go to the next slide while I wait. Cool. All right. So tracking
Cool.
methods. Oh, did you have something to add?
No, no, good.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to.
Tracking methods, food diaries. These are food apps, or actually, some people like to manually write. We have apps in tech. I kind of ball them into the same one, and then we have mindful eating. So let's let's jump into it. So our tracking methods, monitoring progress. We have pen and paper, always readily available, super easy. Most people have that lying around. It's easy to carry with you as well. You can, make the tables as much as you want. You don't necessarily have to be stuck within the confines of what the app provides you. Gerald says he's a fan. I used to as well. Something about handwriting it makes it, I don't know. I don't know what that is, but makes it more
Feels
sentimental.
good.
It does feel good.
Yeah.
And reflecting. So you can go back, you can see what you've been doing. You can see that the progress is changing page by page, and it gives you a little boost. The winner's effect, if you will. Small little victories will compound into bigger ones. Now, the downsides are yes, time consuming. You do have to kind of estimate versus, weighing it out, which can be better for some individuals. And it does weigh on you over time, especially, 16, 20 weeks into a cut. It's a long time. It's a lot of energy. Now, since you're a pen and paper guy, or you used to be, Kyle, what do you have
Hmm.
on? Do you have anything to add, either
So
pro
pen and
or con?
paper. I mean, yeah, personal preference. I will tell you guys that I actually for when it comes to calories, um, anything nutrition wise, I would heavily preference or prefer to use an app like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal or something like that. Um, pen and paper is amazing though. I like using it for journaling or note taking, anything like that, versus electronics. But when it comes to something like nutrition, the only reason I really prefer electronic variations versus paper would be because there's so many variables when it comes to nutrition. You're talking the protein makeup, your so your macro breakdown with all that, the calories themselves, everything. So it's a bit more difficult to keep track of everything, and that's just where those cons for me come into play. There's nothing wrong with using paper and whatnot to track it all. Honestly, if it's your preference, then definitely that it all comes down to sustainability. So within reason, whatever works better for you, uh, that's what you ideally should go with. But also, don't be afraid to try something new. So if you are used to using something like an electronic to or an app to track everything, don't be afraid to dip into pen and paper sometime and see how it works for you, or vice versa, right? And I think that's the next slide really is to go into apps, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. And I know that people like Fish, she will track her cuts, but she won't via app, but she'll do more of a pen and paper approach with something less
Mm-hmm.
strict, like a surplus, or a maintenance. She does a lot of diet breaks,
Mm-hmm.
so she'll just eat. She's not going crazy, but she'll just eat what she normally does, maybe a little more, and that seems to work for her as an individual. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the tracking, I think Big Boy talked about it. He's he says he hates or he doesn't like it that much. It is a pain in the butt, so it won't work for everyone.
No. Yeah, and then track. So apps and tech. So pros with this is convenience. So that's I think that's a big thing for me too. Of course, it's just convenience when it comes to like the data itself. Um, being able to, for me, pull up an application, scan my food, and then have it show me the macro breakdown, the calories, the micronutrients as well, all the information that I need, and having the graphs, everything else, and that's a big thing for me. Just like having all that data and being able to have it easily synthesized to the point where I can easily understand it and not have to worry about doing all the math, whatever it is. Like that to me makes it a lot easier to track my food. Um, But yeah, convenience, variety. Many apps offer barcode scannings, calorie databases, and personalized insights. So yeah, Chronometer, MyFitnessPal, probably some of the best ones. I'm a big fan of Chronometer so far. Uh, Probably got me on that
Yeah,
one.
it's basically
Um,
MyFitnessPal for free.
yeah. By the way, you can get MyFitnessPal. You can get the so I know in the U.S. on MyFitnessPal they actually got rid of the barcode scanner. They made it
Yeah.
part of their subscription here in the U.S. But there is a way to actually get that uh, back.
Oh, really?
So if anybody's so if anybody's in the U.S. maybe and don't and maybe you used to use MyFitnessPal and the barcode scanner there. All you actually have to do with that is you just have to change your location to
Genius.
well I changed just change your location. I changed it to the UK, and yeah, it gave me the barcode scanner. So hack there for MyFitnessPal.
Fitbit's got one too, apparently.
Yeah, so I know. Yeah, Gerald. I think Gerald uses Fit
Yeah.
quite a bit there.
And
So, um,
I just wanted to touch on.
yep.
I'm seeing a lot more now. I can't remember the one name, but I know Jeff Nippert has one, Macro Factor as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Macro Factor. Yep.
I don't know how the RP one is. I know it's expensive too. It's like ridiculously expensive, but
So,
there are
and that
quite a few options.
right, yeah, and that's the thing. Some of the more prominent ones that you might actually pay for. I think Macro Factor might be one, and then maybe even the RP, maybe one or maybe both of these do this, but they may actually automatically adjust your
They
calories.
do. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so they automatically adjust your calories as you track your weight, as you track your different metrics. So, which is crazy, pretty cool,
Mhm.
honestly. Um, I don't know if MyFitnessPal or Chronometer actually do that even with their paid variations.
I don't think they do.
But yeah, so that's huge. I mean, you don't have to do that uh, manually, and that's something you still have to do with something like Chronometer, pen and paper. I mean, you still have to do all that manually, but that's a pretty neat feature. So, um, yeah, and then motivation. So some integrate challenges, social features, and progress tracking. Uh, Again, just for me, it's a lot of the data, the easily accessible data. So, cons: some apps require subscriptions or in-app purchases, like we were just referencing with some of those other ones with the more higher tiered benefits. But Chronometer is an app. We'll share it down. I'll find it here and I'll share it down. Chronometer is free, and you don't really need much more beyond what the base level is in some of these apps. So Chronometer's free, MyFitnessPal is free, and I'm sure there are a bunch of others out there that are free and accessible for everybody. Um, but the fact is the free versions offer more than enough. So technology dependence relies on devices and internet access, I guess, there. So although there's not too many people without that stuff nowadays, smartphones, everybody pretty much has a smartphone.
Hmm.
Um, the one thing I could see is that maybe you don't want to be on the phone super late at night, right before bed, counting your calories, stuff like that. Um, I could see that, and I've often thought about that as I don't always want to be in my phone, and that's something. I mean, that's just how I track my stuff. So I almost have to be in my phone to keep track of my calories and stuff. But
That's a good point.
so that might be a thing to want to stay away from it, but you can't because you're tracking it on the phone. So um, information overload. Some apps might have overwhelming features. So this might come down to the data itself. So something like Chronometer, for example, it breaks down your micronutrients or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of data that these apps will display, and maybe you just don't understand all of it, and that can be overwhelming. Or maybe you just don't understand completely how to use the application. Um, which gave me a thought. But once you get used to it, definitely is easy. But I could see how trying to first learn how to use some of this tech stuff can be a little bit overwhelming. So, um, but I know a lot of you young people are good with all this. I'm sure.
I mean, honestly though, a little screen recording probably wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to do,
Yeah, that was my thought.
especially on
So
making the macro adjustments, because you have to override if you want
yeah,
specific
yeah,
macros.
yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Add it to the list.
Yeah, pen and paper right now, taking notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty much that. And next one here. So mindful eating. Do you want to touch on this one?
Yeah, sure. Um, so our pros to mindful eating. So develop long-term awareness over hunger and satiation cues. It's that's a really important one because especially if you're like myself, I have always been a bored eater. So it's important to learn when you're eating because you're actually hungry and when you're eating because you're just bored. Holistic focuses, so the experience focus on the experience of just eating, not the calories. These are kind of like the diet breaks I'm talking about. Promotes well-being, improve emotional connection to food and body image. So I talk about Fish doing this a lot, because she gets tired of tracking sometimes, and you make some progress and sometimes you need a break. There is a fatigue factor outside of just physical. You build mental fatigue as well, and it accumulates just like anything else. So there's going to be a time where either you can intentionally or mindfully eat, or there's going to be a time where you kind of like break down and enough's enough. So this goes into the cons as well. It requires practice. You're gonna Mindful eating is going to take a little time and effort, especially after a cut. You don't want to just binge and eat whatever you see in sight. Otherwise, what's the point? You might not know exactly how much you're consuming, but if you prioritize protein in most of your meals, you can kind of mitigate this con. And it's gonna depend heavily on the individual. Some people, no matter what they do, they are disciplined to a T. And now for others, the discipline has taken a long time to develop, and sometimes it breaks, old habits break through. So we're all going to be in different spots of our journey. So you just have to be, again, mindful, and it's important to practice these things so you get better at them, you know? Because no one wants to be tracking food their entire life. But once you eat the same
Mm.
meals enough, like everyone knows, or not everyone, but a lot of people know what they like to eat and the meals they eat more often. So at a certain point, you're going to know, okay, when I pour the milk up to that spot in the glass and I put a scoop of protein, you can pretty much eyeball how many calories that is. Or if you know, some people use the fist and finger method. We can get into that later, but you know, portion sizes based off of your hand measurements are relatively accurate. So it's unlikely you're going to be measuring for your whole life, but if you want specific goals while you're young, you know, I think it's good to use other methods, but mindful eating is very healthy.
Right. And I was going to say that going along with the idea that, I guess falling back to bad habits, right? You're doing well, you get distracted, you fall off, you know, maybe you eat something that obviously wanted, but it's not good for you, whatever it
Yep.
is, and you start letting it affect you negatively, right? And then just kind of again snowball effect, right? Because that
Yep.
does happen. You fall off. Well, I think maybe subjective, really, but something that typically works for me is first off recognizing that maybe Chick-fil-A. I don't know. So I like Chick-fil-A. And if there's a day where I want to eat that and I know it's not ideally good for me, um, I just make that adult decision. I tell myself, you know what? I know this isn't the greatest thing to be eating right now, but I'm going to make this decision, this decision itself. I'm not going to let the decision make itself for me, but I'm going to actively make this decision and say that you know what? I know it's not great for me, but I'm going to eat this today because, it's just what I want to do. And
Exactly.
I'm not going to let it have any negative impact on me, my results, my day-to-day, anything like that. I'm just being an adult here and I'm making this decision for myself to have this not so good thing for me, but because I want it. Maybe
Yeah.
I don't deserve it, but I want it.
And
And
that's
then just
part of
get
life,
back
man.
on everything from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly that. That's sustainability. That's life. Um, you know, yeah.
You're also not taking advantage of the situation. You're not going Chick-fil-A. You say, all right, I'm going to go Chick-fil-A and then getting three 30 count nuggets. You're going to get
Hmm.
a normal meal and
Right.
that'll be it. You'll move on with your life. You're not going to eat 15,000 calories of Chick-fil-A. It's,
Yeah.
you made the decision and you're going to go through it. It happens. Yeah. Fish's relatives are over right now, and we're doing a lot of not eating at home. Sometimes you just have to bite the bullet. It happens. Such is life. You'll get back on track next week, or you get back on track the next day.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. So, um, I just want to throw those in chat too, real quick.
Perfect.
Uh, cool. Okay. So next one I think is again, um, what was that? So, oops, did I go too far? Yeah, my bad. So importance of consistency. So that kind of is kind of what we're getting at here with sustainability, um, and consistency and whatnot. Uh, a lot of this, a lot of your progress in just about any aspect of life, right? It doesn't have to just be nutrition, fitness, whatever it is. It's all about the consistency of it and what you can do for yourself that is sustainable and progressive. And that's what is going to be the most important part of all of this, right? Um, and I mean, we've kind of talked about this. Common pitfalls is to like again, just kind of how we reference if you know something isn't great for you, that's a pitfall. Falling for something that's not good for you, and letting it control you versus you controlling that negative thing. Um, that could be a pitfall in and of itself. Uh, just again being an adult per se, and making those decisions decisively for yourself, and being okay with that result, and then getting back on your routine the day after, right? So not letting that those things negatively affect you, um, you know, and that's all important when it comes to building sustainable habits as well. Um, think about maybe small changes over time. Um, don't go straight from working maybe 1 day a week all the way up to like 6 days a week, right? Or
Hmm.
something like that. Or don't maybe when it because we're talking nutrition specifically here, um, if you have never tracked in your life, but all of a sudden you want to start tracking every single meal every day, well, maybe that's too much.
Yep.
Maybe
Baby
backpedal
steps.
and yeah, maybe just try maybe because I know you get up in the morning, breakfast is probably rushed for a lot of people, right? So maybe breakfast isn't the ideal meal to start tracking. Um, maybe try tracking your dinner every night. uh, try that first, right? You can actually sit down, you can figure out the app, actually be intentional with what your tracking method. So if it's chronometer, for example, or if you want to do pen and paper, just sit down, look through the nutrition label on your food. Maybe do some reading about tracking, and weighing with your food with a scale or something like that, right? But be really intentional about that one meal first, and then gradually increase the amount of meals you track or whatever it might be, right? So just starting small and working your way up. Those small changes made over an extended period of time really do amount to a very very large change over a more so extended period of time. So,
Yeah, and it's that way with everything in life. You know, you,
mhm.
you see some people and you think, oh my God, how do they do that? How is how can they do so much? How can they do all that tracking and all that lifting and blah blah blah? It's because you build these habits over time, and it's just another day for some, and it's unfeasible for others. You're at your own point in your journey. Just do what you can in this moment of time, and try to add a little more each day or each week.
So that's kind of like why in our server description here in Project Rain we actually have the idea of Kaizen.
Yeah,
It's this idea that you're just and it's referenced in a lot of different ways, but Kaizen itself is the idea that you're progressing a small amount consistently over time, and
yeah,
that's what that is. That's what the premise of all of this is, and how it all kind of ties together when it comes to sustainability, consistency, everything. All these variables kind of come together with this idea to just you know increase or progress consistently, gradually. So in small amounts, but
perfect.
um, let's see what else we got. So calorie deficits. We'll just kind of cover a little bit here. Again, I know we talked about it previously in multiple ways. Um, we'll just skip to the next one here. So calorie deficits again. You need to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. You need to be in a calorie deficit. So what that means is that you need to be again consuming less energy than um, required to maintain your weight. You need to be maybe expending more energy, right? Whatever it might be, you just need to be burning more calories or more energy than you're actually consuming, right? So just to kind of touch again here on calorie deficit, a calorie deficit or a caloric deficit is when you expend more calories than you consume. This deficit creates an energy gap that your body compensates for by using stored fat for fuel, leading to weight loss. So, what is considered a healthy deficit? So, this kind of goes back to, let's say, for example, you calculate your TDEE, your total daily energy expenditure, and it comes out to be 2,500 calories, right? then it would be recommended that you would be in a deficit. A number that's always thrown around is about a 500 calorie deficit per day. So if you're looking at a TDE of 2,500, you'd want to be consuming ideally somewhere around that 2,000 calorie mark, and then from there you would just consistently weigh yourself, and then match that up to how much weight you're losing over that period of time. So
Yep.
if you're losing a pound, you follow that routine, 2,500 calorie TDEE, drop your calories to 2,000 calories, and that's what you consume consistently per day for a week period of time, um, and you lost a pound of weight, then it's very well that you're probably right around your ideal deficit. Although if you're reducing, I guess you maybe more have more to say on this probably, but carbohydrates, if you're consuming less carbohydrates generally will hold water. I can't remember the exact amount. I think it's maybe like a 1-to-4 ratio. Maybe 1 gram of carbohydrates holds about 4 grams of water. Does that
Correct.
sound about right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good. So if you're reducing your carbohydrates when you start entering a deficit, which most people will, um, that would be another way that you'd actually be losing weight. You may have very well lost water weight as well. Um, so,
Yeah, and if you think of
uh,
going right from bulk to cut, 1,000
mhm,
calorie difference, a lot of people don't take maintenance phases, even though they should. Some people don't. They're like, whatever. You change that 1,000 calories. Majority of those calories are carbohydrates,
mhm,
and let's say it's a extreme example. Let's say 800 of those calories are carbohydrates. That would be, you know, like 200 grams of carbs. So if each one's holding water, you're looking at like a 2 to 3 pound difference in a single day, and
mhm.
that's pretty significant. So don't be super concerned with those initial weeks, like we talk about. The scale's going to change heavily when you go from maintenance to weight loss or maintenance to a bulk.
Mm.
Gerald
Yeah.
asked, when you reduce carbs, would you recommend increasing sodium to retain the water? No, not necessarily, because it's different water retention. One's glycogen, one is just salt. You're gonna be storing water in all your cells versus just muscular. And are you just gonna increase sodium forever on your cut? Probably not, unless you're doing more cardio, I guess. But then if you're doing more cardio, you're gonna be losing more. It's just a balance. You're just gonna have to adjust with your diet, and you're gonna have to accept that dip in the scale. Dev, I did respond. We will touch base on that at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. That could be an issue, right? Just consuming the same stuff over a period of time. Some people could do it, some people can't, but it could be a thing here. So common deficit mistakes, crash dieting, of course, just you know, um, really going deep on your calorie deficit, not a good idea. Um, Excessive exercise or overtraining, ignoring hunger cues, overeating, undereating. If you're hungry, I would say eat until you're relatively content. You know, um, but hunger cues are big. Uh, Excessive exercise or overtraining, crash dieting, those kind of can go hand in hand in a way that your deficit might be too large and can definitely be the opposite of what you want when it comes to your goals. You'll lose more muscle mass through your deficit, um, which is obviously not what we want at all. I mean,
Correct.
nobody really wants to enter deficit and lose muscle mass. I mean, you've worked so hard to obtain it. Um, so really, I can't imagine a worse thing to do, honestly, when it comes to being in a deficit. Like when it comes to that. So,
Yeah.
and calorie surpluses. We'll just skip to the next one. So you want this one, brother?
Yeah. So surplus. A lot of people ask, can I lose fat and gain muscle at the same time? For majority of people, the answer is no, unless you're out. You know, there's details, but bottom line answer is more than likely going to be no. So we need to go into a calorie surplus. What is a calorie surplus? It is just when you're taking in more energy than you're expending. So that's that 3 to 500 calories extra that we talked about above your TDEE. So after all your exercise, not your BMR. And what this does, it ensures that you have all the building blocks you need to repair fully, and recover fully. So when we eat in a surplus, our body has everything it needs to, repair those micro tears, mitigate fatigue, and do other bodily functions such as hormone production, etc. And now, if we talk about controlling the surplus quality, not all calories are created equal. Great point to touch on. A 500 calorie surplus of pure saturated fats, not going to do the same as lean proteins, complex carbohydrates, and unsaturated fats. So you want to focus on whole foods, nutrient dense foods, and I will also take this time to say do not buy mass gainer. I've
Mm,
been talking to a lot of kids, you know. Uh, if you insist on drinking your calories, make sure that the serving is less than 750 calories and that you're making it at home and you're not buying it from a tub. So the reason we have these huge surpluses is because we think, okay, well, if a 300 calorie surplus or a 500 calorie surplus is really good for us, why don't we have a 1500 calorie surplus? More is better. And unfortunately, that is not true. So beyond 500 calories, you're going to be storing predominantly fat. So Kyle has 300 here. That's a great number to start with. If you think you need a little more, you can bump it to 500, but that is certainly the upper limit of a surplus. And minimizing fat gain, just kind of touched on that. The moderate surplus, way better long term. You're going to yield
mm,
more results, and your cut is going to be exponentially shorter.
right on. Cool. So, yeah, and something that I was actually thinking about too, probably with this calorie surpluses versus deficits. Obviously, deficit you can go 500 calories, and maybe even more on occasion for sure.
Sure.
Um, just depends, really circumstantial. The deeper you go,
Yeah.
but then with surpluses, you're looking at what, like a 300 calorie or so surplus, and obviously, if you are truly in a 300 calorie surplus, you're going to gain weight, and if you're going to gain weight, you're going to be putting on more muscle mass, right? More fat too. But the idea of having your calories at, like a lesser amount when you're in
Hmm.
that surplus is to minimize, well, yeah, again, just like the point there is just to, again, of course, minimize your fat gain,
Yep.
right? Um, so, but again, something I guess I was thinking about too with this is that the less amount of calories you are at below or above your TDEE, the more meticulous you might have to be. So
Correct.
if you're aiming
Yep.
for something like 300 calorie surplus versus, let's say, comparably a 500 calorie deficit, and you're tracking your calories, you're going to have to be a lot more meticulous if you want to be right at that point or right around that point of
Yep.
300 or 500. You'll have to be a little bit more meticulous with your tracking and whatnot. So
But it
something
also,
to kind of think about.
yeah, it also leaves you a little bigger margin of error at the same time. But I want to, going off that, I want to touch on the term main gaining. So
Mm,
there's a there is a belief out there. I believe it started from Greg Doucette. Now, I don't disagree with Greg Doucette when he says that you can, severely reduce your fat gain and only yield muscle gain.
mm,
Now, he eats at like a 50 or 100 calorie surplus, something very precise. But this man has
yeah,
also been, competing in bodybuilding for 25 years. He eats the
right.
same exact thing every single day. He has
Mm,
chefs prepare it for him. So,
mm,
like, it all the that those are the details he doesn't mention. I doubt that a 16-year-old will have the same consistency,
Yeah.
especially when mom's making the food, I see that a lot as well, that I can't really eat this. I only eat what my mom makes. Well, don't expect main gaining to exactly work. Do what is best for your situation. If you got
Hmm.
chefs, if you have the exact same meals every day, more power to you. But
Right. Makes tracking and everything a lot easier, right?
sure,
But
yeah, when someone does
also,
it for you.
well, yeah, yeah, and and generally just eating the same. If you can bear eating the same meals every day for the most part, it makes things so much easier.
It
And
does.
I'll tell you this one thing from personal experience is that that's something that I do quite often. Is I will literally eat the same thing for months on end. If I
Yeah.
enter a certain stage, whatever it might be, bulking or cutting or whatever it is, I'm probably going to be eating the same meals potentially every single day.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I would say maybe on the weekends I'm a little off typically with my how I do things, but yeah, pretty typical. And something if it makes it easier to be in a calorie surplus or a deficit or manipulate your calories in whichever way based on your goal, um, something that I often think about is not aligning my overall, my calorie goal, whatever it is, with with calories per se, with that specific number.
Mhm.
So if I want to be in a surplus of, let's say, 300 calories, for example, um, you know, and really what I might attribute those 300 calories surplus to is food. So if
Yep.
I'm eating the same meals every day, and I know that, for example, I want to bump up my carbohydrates on, let's say, a weekly basis to stay in that deficit, because obviously, if you're in a deficit, you're going to be gaining weight. And if you're gaining weight, your TDEE increases. Okay. And you'll have to consistently manipulate that TD, or I'm sorry, that surplus on maybe a weekly basis or whatever it might be, um, bi-weekly basis, whatever you might want to do. Uh, you could think of it more as just increasing the quantity of food.
Yeah.
So if I'm eating the same
Exactly.
exact meals every single day, maybe I throw in another 50 grams of rice
Mhm.
on a weekly basis, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, and per meal or something like that, right? And that you could think of it that way, just to kind of eat a little bit more food on a weekly basis
Yeah.
instead of
Absolutely.
hyper focusing on the calories itself. So,
And that was the percentages that I was talking about. Once you find
mhm.
what works for you, it's really easy to adjust. It's just like a little bit here or a little less there.
Yep, yep,
That's
yep,
perfect.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, cool. Okay, so then
Oh, that's it.
I think next. Yep, yep, that's it. So,
All right, let me answer
uh,
Dev's question because he's been patiently waiting. He asked his question a little over an hour ago. So, Dev asks, as a vegetarian and Indian guy, the biggest problem is I'm bored of eating the same common protein sources such as paneer, soy chunks, etc. Every single day. I want variety. So, now, Dev, I have follow-up questions for you. Is dairy included in your diet? If so, or is it easily accessible? So, as a vegetarian, I mentioned this earlier in the seminar, the the pairing of different vegetarian options can make complete amino profiles, or in other words, you can make the equivalent of, meats, whole proteins. So I can send some resources either directly into the chat or uh, I believe we have two posts on it. We have a whole chart of grams of protein per 100 calories of X, like watercress. Especially if you have trouble volume eating. Watercress has 20 grams of protein for every 100 calories consumed. Now, that being said, I believe that's 900 grams of watercress. So I don't know who's eating 2 pounds of or 3 pounds of watercress, but
hmm,
it does, your veggies will have little bits of protein. If you can have dairy, yogurts, protein powders, milk, those do offer a lot of variety. I would try to stay at the leaner options if you could, but everyone's situation is different. Now, as for some simple combinations, okay, perfect. So then I would suggest you also look into yogurts. Uh, I think yogurt and fruit is very underrated. Greek yogurt is not available. Okay. Again, you're gonna have to work with what you have. So different pairings of grains and legumes or beans, legumes and nuts, grains and dairy, and legumes and seeds. So I did throw out a lot of words there, but oftentimes if you pair those things, I can elaborate in chat in a minute, but if there's different pairings, rice and beans, super popular. So rice and beans, and then whatever else you enjoy that you want to add, because now you know that you are now you know you're hitting your protein goal with rice and beans, or at least your protein profile. You can add other things in there to make it a little more enjoyable. But as a vegetarian, you are going to be restricted. I would say create a baseline of complete protein meals, and then add whatever sorts of you know soy chunks, paneer, veggies you enjoy on top of that. I hope that answered your question in depth. Can eat on legumes? Yeah, I can eat on legumes. They are incomplete protein sources, but I work on. Yeah, and there's plenty of resources online. I can send you some directly. I will make a post on it later as well. But it is tough, especially if you don't have options like Greek yogurt. I would suggest if you can order a whey protein or a whey protein isolate. Yep. Are there any other questions? And if you have anything to add, Kyle,
No, that
kind
sounds
of
pretty good. Pretty
that's it.
solid.
It's an extremely good use case for protein powders. Convenience. And I guess in your case, since you're limited on your protein varieties, BCAAs, as much as I hate to support them because they're like, I don't know, a lot of fitness influencers push them for money. That is a good use case because you're missing certain aminos because you're limited in your food variety. So in some cases, a BCAA might be best if you have the expendable income. But I would prefer to see you eat whole food.
Ve- Vegetarian, so eggs, is that something that vegetarians can eat? Because I
Yes,
mean,
I
it's an
believe
animal
so.
product, but I don't know if that's, but
I
it,
think
yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
it's a
eggs
gray
are,
area, especially if it's
yeah,
some are religion based and some are not.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah, but I mean, if eggs is something that is in there, obviously, eggs are such
Yeah, it's like
an
the moral
amazing source.
implication, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Is it a chicken? Is it not?
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know there's the yeah, like you said, gray area with it with that. So
And just so you guys know, I will have a hard stop it in about 7 minutes. I see someone typing a
yeah,
question, but that's fine. You can keep typing your question. When you're
yeah.
trying to lose
Don't be
weight
afraid to ask them.
and lifting weights, how do you know if you're actually losing fat, gaining muscle, if your weight stays the same? So, that
Hmm.
is a great question because sometimes, especially when you eat in your maintenance, your scale stays the same, but your body composition is changing. It's very
Hmm.
common in the beginning as well.
Right.
Now, what you can do, you can make a checklist to make sure that you're doing everything on paper correctly. So if your diet's in check, you're meeting your calorie goal, you're exercising as much as you present that you are, and the number is staying the same, you can either that's why we say eating at maintenance is good, especially if you go from, higher fat composition, like skinny fat or just overweight in general, versus, starting out as super skinny. Maintenance is good because just the increase in exercise and that adaptation perspective will create muscle mass and it will lead to a leaner physique overall. So you can either put your faith in the process or you can continue to increase your activity so you can see the number. That one is a hard one because it requires you to put faith into something that you're relatively new to, which not a lot of people can do. But if you can visually see progress week by week, month by month, you know you're on the right track.
Yeah. I know I know Gerald mentioned something to me in DMs there about food order throughout the day.
Hmm.
Um, you know, if it I what was your question exactly, Gerald? Is Gerald still in here? He is not. So he asked when doing mindful eating, would order of food consumption help with satiety? And I don't know how you feel about this, Brawley, but personally, I protein is obviously the most satiating macronutrient. So a lot of the time, what I would typically do, especially, I mean, maybe even specifically when cutting, is I will try to eat higher protein meals earlier on throughout the day, midday, up until later in the afternoon or whatever. I would just try to eat a lot of my protein prior to end of day,
Hmm.
and then I would generally increase my carbohydrates towards the end of the day. So that's often what I would typically do. Again, just the protein ideally. I don't know. Just because it is the most satiating, um, I generally don't. If I eat a higher protein meal, I generally don't have any issues, any uncontrollable hunger pangs or anything like that throughout the day. So I'm not, I don't feel like I'm starving.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know how you feel about that or how you typically do. Uh,
Yeah, I had this conversation with Fish as well. She sent something from the glucose revolution. Um, it was, I believe it's saying that eating your leafy greens first because they're higher in fiber, then going to protein and then carbs is.
yeah,
But again, it really depends if you have trouble in the first place, right? It's I'm
right,
I'm
yep,
in the same
yep,
boat you are. I have my meal, and I've been doing a lot more volume eating, so you know, more veggies, lower calorie stuff, so I can have more
right.
food for the same amount. And there's times where I can't even finish my food and I'm on a cut. I'm just there's just so much there that I'm full constantly. So it's all going to
I
come
feel
down to the user. But if you
right,
need
yep,
these little
yeah,
tricks, go for it.
yeah. Cool. Anything else? Let's see.
Branching off what you asked, it made me think of like meal composition around working out. Some people do that as well. They'll eat a lot of their carbs before and after working out, and then more of
Hmm.
their fats in the meals farther away from working out. That is also something that some people consider. Because if you eat a lot of fats and carbs before the gym, you're going to be super sluggish. So, carbs and
You said
protein.
fats and
Yeah, fats and carbs generally
yeah.
everyone has done this, I'm going to assume, but you have a delicious meal. It's something like pizza, right? You eat one
Hmm.
too many slices, or in America, Thanksgiving, it's just all carbs and
Yeah,
fat, and you pop on that couch after you're done eating and you just want to sleep. Everyone's had a meal
yeah.
that put them to sleep, and that's generally speaking, high carb, high fat.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And that kind of comes down to like some people I've heard a lot of people and I don't really track this, but and that's again why I kind of eat more carbs towards the end of the day too is because I've heard that and have read consistently that eating higher carbohydrates may help towards the end of the night for somebody to go to sleep. You know what I mean? Fall asleep,
Yeah,
right? Rather than eating a protein packed meal or something like that. But
yeah, and
yeah.
I think that, especially with sleep, I think that always comes down to the individual. Is
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably just a bit
if you're
subjective.
sensitive